Now, that brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbrooks?
Have you watched Young Frankenstein and thought you knew the whole story? Not so fast. This movie may be a comedy classic because it's a parody of the iconic Frankenstein movie, but behind the scenes it was just plain weird. We're talking giggles, inside jokes, and many eyebrow-raising moments. Mel Brooks was in full mad scientist mode and no one was safe. Even the cast couldn't keep a straight face. It was a mix of chaos, charm, and comedy all rolled into one. Stick around as we dive into 20 weird facts about Young Frankenstein that you didn't know. Number 1. Gene's favorite. Of all the movies Gene Wilder made, Young Frankenstein was his favorite. He said it clearly and often, with no need for dramatic build-up. It was the film he was most proud of. He called it the best thing he ever did, not just as an actor, but as a writer. He helped shape the story from the very beginning. The idea came from his imagination, long before any studio showed interest. Gene had always loved those old horror films. He wanted to make something that honored them, but still made people laugh. When he shared the idea with Mel Brooks, things began to move. Gene asked for just one promise. If Mel agreed to direct, he had to keep it in black and white. That was the only way Gene felt the movie could work. It had to feel like the classics they both grew up watching. Many actors enjoy their biggest box office hits or award-winning roles the most. Gene chose something personal. He poured his heart into Young Frankenstein. It made him laugh and gave him full creative control. Every scene felt special to him. If someone asked which movie truly captured who he was, he had only one answer. It was always Young Frankenstein. Number 2. Real bones, real reactions. Most people remember Young Frankenstein for its laughs, not its creepy details. Yet one strange fact hides in plain sight. The skeletons used in the film were real, not plastic, but real human bones. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. They specifically wanted the parody to be similar to the original. The scene takes place in the hidden bookcase tunnel. Dr. Frankenstein pulls a chain and the room spins around. Right there, sitting casually in the corner, is a skeleton. Many viewers assumed it was a clever prop. In truth, it came straight from a medical supplier. During the 70s, real skeletons were often used in films and classrooms, since artificial ones were harder to make and much more expensive. No one questioned it back then. Gene Wilder later admitted the skeleton gave him the chills. He said he could feel something different in the room. There was no curse, no strange accidents, nothing like what happened during the making of Poltergeist. Still, the idea of using real bones in a comedy adds an unexpected twist to the story. It was just one of those behind-the-scenes choices that made the film both weird and unforgettable. Even in the middle of a joke, Young Frankenstein knew how to keep things strangely real. Number 3. Igor eyes, makeup, or real. Marty Feldman, who played Igor, had eyes no one could ignore. Huge, round, and always slightly off to the side, they gave his character a strange and hilarious look. Most people thought those eyes were special effects or clever makeup. In reality, they were all Marty. As a child, Marty was diagnosed with Graves' disease. It is a thyroid condition that can affect the muscles and tissues around the eyes. The condition caused his eyes to bulge outward. At one point, doctors attempted surgery to fix it. The goal was to reduce the swelling and improve his vision. Unfortunately, the operation failed. The results made his eyes appear even more prominent. For most people, that might have been a setback. For Marty, it became part of his identity. Rather than hide it, he leaned into it. His eyes became his signature on screen. They brought something strange and brilliant to the role of Igor. His gaze alone could steal a scene. Gene Wilder once said that Marty didn't have to do much to be funny. One look was often enough. There was no special lens, no movie magic, just Marty's real-life condition turned into comedy. His eyes added authenticity to his role and made the movie more iconic. Number 4. The monocule that won the role. Kenneth Mars earned the part of Inspector Kemp in Young Frankenstein in the most delightfully unpredictable way. He was performing in a play in Buffalo when Mel Brooks called him out of the blue. At that moment, Mars showed up to the audition wearing an eye patch and perched over it a monocle. Brooks asked, "Is that too much?" Mars replied, "Not at all," and Brooks cheered. "Good, you've got the part." Mars had already worked with Brooks on The Producers, and that connection surely helped. Still, it was this single quirky detail, an eye patch topped with a monocle, that sealed the deal. What might have seemed over the top became a hilarious trademark for Inspector Kemp, a bumbling detective with one prosthetic arm, an eye patch beneath his monocle, and a thick Bavarian accent. This small piece of costume defined the character. Instead of hiding eccentricity, Mars wore it proudly in every scene. Viewers didn't just see the detective, they felt his absurd confidence, as if he believed the monocle made him more distinguished. In a film filled with comedic oddities, Kenneth Mars reminded everyone that sometimes greatness lies in the tiniest, most unexpected details. Number 5. The last-minute actress swap. Casting for Young Frankenstein went mostly smoothly, until it didn't. Just before filming began, there was a sudden and unexpected swap between two of the lead actresses. Originally, Madeline Kahn had been set to play Inga, the sweet and slightly quirky lab assistant. Meanwhile, Terry Garr was supposed to take on the role of Elizabeth, the dramatic and high-maintenance fiancée. That all changed during rehearsals. Madeline Kahn read through the script and quickly realized something. The role of Elizabeth had more potential for wild, over-the-top comedy. She told Mel Brooks she felt more drawn to it. She wanted to play the glamorous diva with the dramatic voice and larger-than-life personality. Mel listened, trusted her instincts, and agreed. Terry Garr was then offered the role of Inga. She accepted without hesitation and played the role of Inga. Her performance turned the character into something sweet, funny, and unforgettable. The switch worked better than anyone expected. Madeline's bold request helped shape one of the most iconic performances in the movie. Terry's quiet wit balanced it perfectly. Two talented women ended up exactly where they needed to be. It was a last-minute decision that could have gone wrong, but instead it became one of the smartest moves in the entire production. Number 6. The wandering hump. Out of all the strange details in Young Frankenstein, few are as quietly hilarious as Igor's hump. At first glance, it seems like a classic hunchback gag. Marty Feldman wore a prosthetic hump on his back, and that was that. Or so everyone thought. During filming, someone on set noticed something odd. The hump had moved. One day it was on Igor's left side. The next day it was on the right. Then it disappeared entirely. No one could figure out what was happening. The costume department swore they never changed it. Marty never said a word. Eventually, Marty admitted the truth. He had been moving the hump around on purpose to see if anyone would notice. It was his private joke. He did not ask Mel for permission and never explained it on screen. The result was subtle, weird, and perfect for his character. Once Mel found out, he laughed and decided to leave it in. It fits the movie perfectly. It wasn't supposed to make any sense because it was a parody, and that single act enhanced the whole purpose of the movie. Number 7. The madman in the apartment. Even the best partnerships have their tense moments. While working on Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks fought. It happened at Gene's apartment. They were going over the script when the tension exploded. Mel had yelled at Gene and then stormed out of the apartment in anger. Gene was left sitting there, unable to process what had happened. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Mel. Instead of apologizing directly, he used humor. In a calm voice, he asked, "Who was that madman you had in your house?" Then he warned Gene not to let crazy people visit because they were too dangerous. Gene immediately understood that that was Mel's way of saying sorry. No ego or long speech, just a silly line and a smile on the other end of the phone. Gene laughed and tension faded. From that point on, the two stayed in sync through the rest of the project. Even during a stressful production, they found a way to keep things calm and under control. It was one of those small, odd exchanges that made their partnership work. Number 8. Real instruments from the real lab. One of the most impressive details in Young Frankenstein was not the acting or the jokes, or even the black and white style. It was the lab. Those strange switches, glowing tubes, and rising platforms looked like they came straight from the original Frankenstein movie. That's because they did. The equipment used in Young Frankenstein was the same set of instruments seen in the original Frankenstein movie from the early 30s. The machines were designed by Kenneth Strickfaden, a pioneer in special effects. He had created them for Universal's original monster films, including Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. By the time Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks began working on their version, those machines were long packed away in storage. Gene had the idea to track them down. To his surprise, they were still in good condition. Kenneth Strickfaden was still alive and agreed to let the team use them again. He even came to work on the film himself, helping set up each piece exactly as he had done decades earlier for the real movie. This detail was a tribute. Gene and Mel wanted to honor the original movie by using the original equipment, and the act brought authenticity, nostalgia, and a little real movie history into every scene. It was the perfect touch for their parody. Number 9. Old-fashioned tricks. In an age where movies rely on computers for almost everything, Young Frankenstein stands out for what it didn't use. There were no digital effects in the film, not one. Every bolt of lightning, every spark, every strange movement in the lab was done the old-fashioned way, by hand, by wire, or by camera trick. This was not because of budget limits, it was a choice. Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks wanted the movie to look and feel like the original horror films from the 30s. Back then, everything had to be built, painted, or rigged up using real materials, so they did the same. If something looked dramatic, it was because someone behind the scenes made it happen in real time. Smoke was created with machines. Lightning was drawn directly onto the film. Floating platforms were lifted with ropes and pulleys. The crew used camera tricks to make rooms look bigger and shadows more intense. Every trick was mimicked from the ones early filmmakers had used decades before. The result was more than just style. It was a vibe. Viewers felt like they were watching an actual black and white horror movie, not a modern parody. That decision gave Young Frankenstein its charm and lasting place in film history. No CGIs, just pure creativity. Number 10. The unexpected cameo. One of the funniest scenes in Young Frankenstein was acted out by a familiar face. The blind hermit who accidentally burns, scalds, and terrifies the monster was played by none other than the award-winning actor Gene Hackman. At the time, Hackman was already a serious actor known for action roles, not comedy. So how did he end up in Mel Brooks's comedic parody? It all started after a simple game of tennis. Gene Hackman and Gene Wilder were friends off-screen and often played matches together. During one of their usual games, Hackman mentioned that he had never done a comedy and wanted to try. Wilder laughed and told him about the movie he was working on. Hackman didn't hesitate. He asked for a small role, something funny, even if it was just a few minutes. Mel Brooks thought it was a great idea. They created the blind hermit scene just for Hackman. He played it completely straight, which made it even funnier. The timing, the voice, the accidental soup spill, it all worked perfectly. His name was left out of the opening credits as a surprise. When audiences finally saw the scene, they laughed even harder once they realized who it was. Gene Hackman wanted to try comedy, and he nailed it on the first try. Number 11. Mel Brooks in the cast. Mel Brooks directed Young Frankenstein, helped write it, and shaped nearly every scene. Yet surprisingly, he stayed out of sight. Unlike many of his other films in which he appeared in full costume, this time he decided not to be seen on screen. That did not mean he wasn't in the movie. Mel had a secret cameo, one you could only hear. Mel provided several voices in the film, but the most memorable one was the howling wolf. That eerie, drawn-out sound that echoed through the hills, that was Mel Brooks, standing off camera doing his best wolf impression. He also voiced the shrieking cat and delivered a few angry lines as Victor Frankenstein through the portrait on the wall. Mel later admitted he had to be convinced not to appear physically in the film. Gene Wilder felt the tone of Young Frankenstein needed to stay consistent, like a real old horror movie. Mel's usual on-screen antics, while hilarious, might have broken that spell, so he agreed to stay behind the scenes mostly. It was a rare case of Mel Brooks showing restraint. Still, he found a way to sneak in just enough of his signature touch. You never saw him, but once you know where to listen, you realize he was there all along, growling and howling. Number 12. Why the Horses Scream. One of the funniest running gags in Young Frankenstein happens every time someone says the name Frau Blücher. Off in the distance, horses whinny and scream as if something truly terrible just happened. It became an instant classic. Viewers laughed every time it happened, even if they had no idea why. So what was the joke? The name Blücher sounds like the German word Blutschrei, which loosely translates to blood scream. That might be part of it. Some believe it was meant to suggest that even animals were afraid of her. Others think it was simply nonsense, that it was scripted only for laughs and never meant to mean anything. In truth, there was no deep meaning. Mel Brooks later explained that the horses screamed simply because it was funny. No big plan, no hidden message, just a perfectly timed sound gag that kept getting better with each repeat. Every time someone said Frau Blücher, the horses lost it, and that was enough. Cloris Leachman, who played Frau Blücher, loved the joke. She once joked that the horses reacted that way because her character was terrifying. Whether it made sense or not didn't matter. The screaming horses became one of the most remembered parts of the film, proof that sometimes a running gag with no clear reason can be pure comedy. Number 13. Peter Boyle's makeup. Peter Boyle brought Frankenstein's monster to life in a way no one expected. He was tall, quiet, and oddly gentle, even with bolts in his neck. His performance balanced comedy and sadness, which made the character surprisingly human. Behind all of that charm, though, was a daily process that tested his patience: the makeup. To become the monster, Peter spent hours each morning in the makeup chair. The work was handled by legendary artist William Tuttle. He had done makeup for countless films, but Young Frankenstein was different. The goal was not to scare people, it was to create something that looked like the old universal monster, but still allowed Peter to show emotion. The process included heavy greenish-gray makeup, a large prosthetic forehead, and of course, the signature neck bolts. The Frankenstein monster headpiece had to stay on whenever he was on screen. Peter often joked about how stiff he felt while wearing it. He once said it was like acting inside a helmet. Despite the discomfort, Peter never complained. He understood that the look was part of the movie and accepted it despite the inconvenience. The monster had to resemble the original design from the 30s, right down to the flat top and heavy eyelids. Thanks to his patience and Tuttle's skills, the result was unforgettable. The monster looked its part, which contributed greatly to the movie's success. Number 14. A comedy that earned serious praise. Young Frankenstein may have been packed with jokes, unserious moments, and wild, funny characters, but the film earned real respect from critics and award shows alike. It was not just popular, it was widely recognized for its craftsmanship. In a time when comedies rarely made it into award conversations, Young Frankenstein stood out. The film received 2 Academy Award nominations in 1975. The first was for Best Adapted Screenplay, shared by Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks. Their writing blended parody, heart, and sharp wit in a way that felt both silly and smart. The second nomination was for Best Sound. It may sound simple, but recreating the exact tone of a classic horror film, complete with creaky doors, thunder, and eerie echoes, took serious skill. Although the film did not win either Oscar, the nominations showed that even a black-and-white comedy full of screaming horses and dancing monsters could be taken seriously. Audiences already loved it, but the recognition from the Academy gave it additional respect, one that a parody movie does not normally have years later. The film is now listed as one of the greatest comedies of all time. It proved that humor, when done with dedication and creativity, could be just as worthy of praise as any drama. Young Frankenstein earned its accomplishment because the cast and crew were dedicated and did not give up until they created a master number 15, sequel or not. When Young Frankenstein hit theaters in 1974, it did more than make people laugh. For some older moviegoers, it stirred something deeper, memories of the original Frankenstein films from the 30s. The look, the sound, the mood, it all felt so familiar. So much so that many believed Young Frankenstein was not a parody at all, but an actual sequel. This confusion was no accident. It was intentionally made to look like a sequel. Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks worked hard to match the original films in every detail. They shot it in black and white, used vintage camera angles, recreated the exact lab equipment, and even mimicked the slow and dramatic pacing. The result was so authentic that viewers who had grown up with Boris Karloff and Colin Clive genuinely thought the monster's story had been picked up where it left off. In interviews, Mel Brooks shared how older audience members would approach him and tell him things like, "It was nice to see the next sequel finally." Some even thanked him for continuing the legacy of the original films. They had no idea it was meant as a comedy. Rather than correct them, Mel took it as the highest compliment. It meant their work had paid off. Young Frankenstein was more than a spoof. It was a tribute so perfect it fooled the very people who remembered the real thing. Number 16. Twice the film, half the length. When Young Frankenstein was finally released, it ran just over 1 hour and 40 minutes. Every scene was polished and timed for laughs. What most people do not know is that the original cut of the film was nearly twice as long. The first version ran close to 3.5 hours. Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder had filmed much more than they needed. They let scenes run long, added bits of physical comedy, and gave the cast space to improvise. The goal was to capture as much comedy as possible, then trim it down later. When they watched the first full cut, they realized it was filled with funny material, but the length made it feel slow. Some of the hilarious jokes were not funny when stretched over several minutes. Mel took on the task of cutting it down. He removed full scenes, shortened others, and made the timing of every joke on point. Gene agreed with every decision. They both understood that comedy needs rhythm. Holding on to too much would have slowed everything down. It was a tough process, but it worked. The final cut was an improvement, and it made the movie iconic. Number 17, Mel Brooks and Frankenstein's Boots. Mel Brooks did not just direct Young Frankenstein, he lived it. Even after filming Wrapped, he carried pieces of the movie with him, literally. One of his favorite souvenirs from the set was the pair of giant platform boots Peter Boyle wore as Frankenstein. These were not just props. They were massive, heavy, custom-made boots designed to make the monster look taller and more imposing on screen. Most people would leave something like that in storage, but Mel Brooks did the opposite. He took the boots home. Not only did he keep them, he wore them proudly. Whenever he went to parties or events, he would occasionally show up clunking around in those oversized monster boots. Friends and fellow actors would burst into laughter as Mel stomped through the room, often pretending to growl or walk stiff-legged like Peter Boyle did in the film. To Mel, the boots were more than just costume pieces. They reminded him of how much fun he had with the cast and crew while making the movie. They were ridiculous and funny in a way that captured everything about Young Frankenstein. It was silly, bold, and completely unforgettable. Whenever he was asked why he loved wearing the boots, he would reply that they made him feel taller and funny. Number 18, The Monster That Made Box Office. When Young Frankenstein was released in December of 1974, no one could have predicted how big it would become. Black and white films were considered old-fashioned, and parodies were often treated as light entertainment, not something to expect major success from. Yet Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder had created something different, a beautiful mix between classic horror and comedy. From its opening weekend, the film was a hit. Audiences were packed in the cinemas all over the country. Word spread quickly, and people who had never seen the original Frankenstein films still found the jokes hilarious. Those who had grown up with the old horror classics appreciated the tribute even more. By the end of its theatrical run, Young Frankenstein had earned over $86 million. That was a huge number in the 70s. It became the third highest grossing film of 1974, just behind Blazing Saddles, another Mel Brooks creation. Critics praised it, viewers adored it. Studios, which once doubted the black and white idea, were suddenly eager for more. What started as a personal passion project for Gene Wilder turned into a cultural event. The movie proved that clever, character-driven comedy could not only hold its own, but it could also dominate the box office. Number 19. A Studio's Regret. Before Young Frankenstein became a box office hit, it almost didn't get made at all. When Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks finished the script, they took it to Columbia Pictures. On paper, it had everything: a known star, a proven director, and a clever take on a beloved genre. Even so, Columbia turned it down. The studio had two major problems with the idea. First, it was going to be shot in black and white. At the time, most studios believed audiences were no longer interested in black and white films. They thought it would hurt ticket sales. Second, the tone confused them. It wasn't a straight horror movie, and it wasn't a typical comedy either. It was something in between, and Columbia was not sure how to market it. Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder didn't give up. They took the project to 20th Century Fox. This time, the pitch landed in the hands of an executive who understood what they were trying to do. Fox agreed to fund the film on one condition. They asked Mel to consider shooting it in color. Mel refused. He said the movie would not work unless it looked like an old horror film. To their credit, Fox listened. They gave Mel full creative control. That decision paid off, and several sources said that Columbia regretted the decision and would go on to accept several Mel Brooks projects. Number 20. The Funeral. Most films wrap with a party, a few speeches, and some hugs between cast and crew. Young Frankenstein ended a little differently. When production came to a close, the team held a funeral. Mel Brooks and the cast had grown attached to the film. It had been more than just a project. It was a labor of love, filled with long days, hard work, and a lot of fun-filled moments. So when filming ended, they decided to send it off in a way that matched the movie's dramatic, strange, and slightly hilarious vibe. They brought Peter Boyle in full monster costume, stretched him out on a cart, and covered him as if he were truly gone. The crew gathered around him, some placing flowers, others bowing their heads in mock sadness. Mel Brooks led the procession. Gene Wilder and the others played along, both mourning and laughing at the same time. It was the perfect goodbye to a film that had brought them so much joy. The funeral wasn't about loss. It was a celebration of something they knew was special. They all enjoyed the time spent on set and would forever remember it, and most of them would go on to say it was one of the best movies they ever acted in. Young Frankenstein wasn't made to be a classic. It was something a few people believed in, something strange and funny that came from the heart. They didn't try to follow what was popular. They just made what they loved, and somehow that worked. All these years later, it is still an all-time favorite among fans. It would also go down in history as one of the best parodies of our generation. What part of the movie do you find most hilarious and why? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more funny content like this. Thanks for watching. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.